best historical evidence for the resurrection.
Oh, okay. Best historical evidence for the resurrection.
This
I
will be
mean,
good.
I take kind of a cumulative approach to the resurrection in that
Yeah, you should.
one of the best pieces of evidence that I think speaks to the tangibleness of the resurrection is that you and I, Michaela, are talking about it 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In that
That's true.
there are other messianic movements in the ancient world,
Mm-hmm.
but I bet you couldn't name any of the individuals involved in those. And there's
Yeah,
a
I
reason
can.
why we're asking questions about Jesus of Nazareth and not Simon Bar Kokhba. And that's because Simon Bar Kokhba led a revolt and died, and his movement died with him. And so I think there's something unique about the movement of Jesus that requires an explanation for what's going on. Because we see the disciples scared and hiding when the crucifixion event takes place. Simon, right? Peter, who's supposed to be the good guy, right? He's like Jesus's right-hand man, tells Peter, you're going to deny me. And lo and behold, that's what he does, right? When push comes to shove.
And Peter does deny him. And another thing too, I was just listening to Sean McDowell talk about this, and we don't have a lot of evidence for how the disciples died. And so whether or not all the disciples are martyred or not, I actually don't think that's really the most important part. I think what's important is that they stood to gain nothing from preaching Christ resurrected, crucified, dead, and resurrected. They stood to gain nothing from that. It wasn't like Joseph Smith and Mormonism like we had on the Alex O'Connor and Trent Horn debate, where it's like Joseph Smith had political aspirations and money and stuff. Like, they all stood to gain something from him, right? Whereas the disciples stood to gain nothing from continuing to preach Christ after he died.
Peter decides 3 times to say, I don't even know who that Jesus guy is. And the disciples, the 11 of them, because Judas has gone and hung himself, are hiding in an upper room, scared and cowering. What takes them from that to being this incredible missionary force? To be able to go back into Jerusalem on something like the day of Pentecost, proclaiming the resurrection to a group of people who very well could have seen Jesus crucified. Something happens, and I think there needs to, at minimum, be an accounting for that. And you talk to secular scholars, and they will grant, okay, the disciples had some sort of experience.
Yeah.
Right? Something motivated them to do this, because it just seems a little bit crazy. I mean, there's the adage that liars make poor martyrs, in that you will die for something you believe to be true, but something you know to be a lie, it's a lot harder to actually go to your grave to.
Yeah, you won't push yourself that far.
Yeah. So sometimes when people hear,
Yeah, and it's like, like liars make bad martyrs. And again, they stood to gain nothing. There was nothing to be gained. They were poor. They were not wealthy. They were persecuted. They were put in jail. They were flogged. They were beaten to death. Like, it was
liars,
not fun.
or sorry, yeah, liars make bad martyrs. Point to something like the like suicide bombers, or those who flew the planes into the towers on 9/11.
True, yeah.
And my answer to that is that those aren't martyrs, those are murderers, A. And B, they don't actually know definitively that what they're dying for is true. They might believe it's true, but the difference between them and the disciples is that the disciples both were there when Jesus died and claimed to have seen him resurrected.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who hijacked the planes on 9/11 weren't there when Muhammad was waging his, escapades in 7th century Arabia. So they're going off of what they believe to be true, not what they know definitively to be true objectively within their kind of own conscious experience. And so I think,
and like that's also a big difference. Like, they saw Jesus died and were afraid, and then something happened, and then suddenly they were preaching him alive again.
there needs to be an account. I think the breadth of the historical case for the credibility of the Gospels is comprehensive enough that it gives us a base work to say that the disciples were not lying, that they believed what they were doing to be true, and that the account for that, all of the kind of alternatives to Jesus' resurrection, I think ultimately fall short. Whether we're talking about group hallucinations or, whatever that be, the disciples stealing the body and trying to make up a story. I think they're implausible based on then what transpires in the years following Jesus' actual, death.
That was great. I had known about the If you don't believe in the lie, then you're not going to be a martyr for it. I knew that, but I hadn't connected that to they had also seen him be crucified, which everybody basically, even secular scholars believe. So, yeah,
and they know that it's costly. So a short time after Pentecost, Stephen, who's part of this inner group, he's not one of the disciples, but he's part of this inner group. He's then proclaiming the gospel message, and then he gets stoned to death. And the disciples see this, and so that's like a warning shot across the bow.
Yeah,
they at that point know this is costly. They could lose their lives for it. That is the moment that you decide, okay, we've gone a little too far. Our friends are being killed.
Yeah.
So maybe.
And also another thing to point out is that Stephen was stoned, but for what though? Like, what was the actual crime? The crime was blasphemy. He said, "I see the Son of Man at the right hand of the Father." He says and so that's blasphemy in that he said that Jesus was essentially God, is what the way that I think they would have taken that for them to actually stone him, because stoning was actually quite rare back then. And so he couldn't have just been proclaiming something that was theologically not what they wanted. It had to be like blatant blasphemy and heresy, which is what Jesus being God would have been to them.
Maybe we can slow our roll in this whole conversation on the Jesus stuff, but that's not what they do. They seem to be more empowered than ever. And so it's just, I think we see an interesting test case. It's the whole, C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity has the whole, what's referred to as the Lewisian trilemma, that Jesus is either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's Lord. And I think that still applies today. If you evaluate what Jesus' claims actually are about himself, he's either lying through his teeth, he's either a lunatic, or he's the Lord of the universe who actually validated the claims that he made about who he is by rising from the dead. And so I think the evidence is on the side, though of course not everybody agrees, that actually happened, that Jesus predicted his own death and resurrection and then pulled it off. And I have a friend who likes to say that people who rise from the dead have more credibility and authority than people who don't rise from the dead. And so that means something.
Yeah, and I would say that, with the resurrection, it's so interesting how all of the arguments come together, the credibility of the New Testament and all of the manuscripts that we have versus other very popular historical figures that we all know. And the fact that the disciples, they didn't behave as if they were just trying to scam people, or they stole the body and they knew it was fake. It's like one of their friends died. It's like when they started dying, it's like, okay, maybe the scam's not working. We're not making any money. We're poor. We're getting beaten. We're getting thrown in jail, and one of us just died. Maybe we just forget the whole thing. I don't see that. I don't see it being likely that they continue if they didn't actually fully believe it, but they saw him die narratively, right? And so something very, very real would have had to happen for them to just turn around and believe that and preach that he is alive. Anyways, thanks so much for sticking around, guys. I love you all. And if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button, and I will do my best to make more content for you guys. Cheers.